everyone, it's Tiny Games here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to go over some ways you can prepare for the Wish Blossom Ranch DLC. Hi Mirabelle. That was a little close. But yeah, we're going to actually discuss the different things you can do so you are most prepared for the DLC. Now, of course, you don't have to do any prep work if you don't want to. DLCs don't require prep work. They truly don't. However, I am someone who generally likes to make my life easier. So I will be doing preparations just to make things easier for me. It just works. That's how I like to do things. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna go through my top tips. Let's begin. Now, my first tip would actually be to get planting some pumpkins. Now, technically, you don't need to plant pumpkins. Just do whatever works for you in terms of a money-making method. So for me, that is planting pumpkins and selling them. Of course, if you are someone who likes to cook to earn money, if you are someone who likes to gather resources and sell those to earn money, then that is what I would recommend doing. So with the new Wish Blossom Ranch DLC coming out, we do know that we are getting new furniture, decor, and new clothing. That's what they teased in the DLC showcase. And we are getting a new thing which is known as a building kit, and we can buy more of those building kits from Scrooge. Now, I suspect those building kits might end up costing a pretty penny. So whatever it takes for you to gain some money, I would recommend doing that so that you are prepared to buy those items. It does look like the kits for building do have multiple parts, so it's very possible if you want to get all those individual pieces, it's gonna cost a lot. And of course, with a new Scrooge store, there's going to be plenty of items to buy. So again, you're going to want to make sure that you do have enough money for purchasing anything new that might come your way from Scrooge. So yeah, if your money is looking a little bit low, I do recommend stocking up on some star coins. Now, my next recommendation would be to prep and set up your storage. So whether you have a floating island used as storage or you use rooms in your home for storage, I would recommend setting something up so that you're at least prepared for all the new resources we are going to get. We obviously know there's going to be some new resources that we do get. We've seen teasers of new resources that we can have and new recipes and things like that and new ingredients. They're all going to need somewhere to go. Now, of course, we're not likely to know exactly how much new stuff we are getting. That is something that, we'll just have to kind of wait and see on. However, what you could do is at least stock up on a few essential chests. Get a chest for new ingredients, get a chest for new flowers, get a new chest for new fish, and just like a few little basics like that. A chest for anything that you might be able to dig up as well. That's another good potential. So just set up at least like 4 or 5 chests. As I said, whether that's in a storage room in your house or it's set up on a floating island, whatever system works best for you. But I would set aside some chests so that you're ready when you do get those new resources. There's nothing worse than going into a DLC, filling up your inventory, and then being overwhelmed, not being able to get new resources because you have a bunch of stuff with no place to put it. So just craft a few chests, buy a few chests, whatever it may be. Just set up a couple of chests so that they're ready for all the new resources to go into. I will be creating a storage room, so there will be a video on that coming to the channel. Now, my next recommendation is actually to do with crafting, and I would recommend that you stock up on a few elixirs and potions, things like that. we are getting a bunch of new resources. We don't know how long it's going to take for certain resources to grow, how long they take to spawn in and things like that. So it will be handy to have these extra potions, which means you're gaining more resources quicker. You know, you get those extra bonuses when you're mining, you get those extra bonuses when you're digging, or when you're fishing and things like, well, actually fishing only gives you golden fish, so maybe skip that one, or at least only get one or two. But certainly for things like the shovel, the growth elixirs, the pickaxe stuff, I would definitely craft a bunch of those, just so that you can maximize how many resources you're getting within sort of one sweep of a biome. It does make it a lot easier. Now, of course, when it comes to making those potions, you might find that you need to do some extra grinding for that too. You might find that you need Vitalis crystals, you might need Dreamlight, things like that. So definitely stock up on your Dreamlight, stock up on your Vitalis crystals and the other resources that are needed for the potions, and get crafting some of those. Like I said, it's all just for maximizing your potential sort of returns on resource grinding. So rather than getting one gem, you could end up with 5 gems, which means perhaps you can craft a new pathing quicker or a new fencing and things like that. There's plenty of reasons why you would want to use these elixirs. So I do highly recommend doing that. Another thing that I recommend doing is to actually complete any quests you currently have. Now, if you are new to the game, this is going to be very overwhelming for you, so you don't have to rush to get everything completed at all if you are new. However, if you are someone who has been playing for a while, perhaps you're a bit of a slacker when it comes to doing the friendship quests, i.e. me, perhaps get those done. Now, obviously, there's nothing that says you have to get these quests done. However, I find it easier to deal with a new DLC knowing that when I look in my quest sections, the only quests are going to be tied to the DLC. It just makes it less overwhelming for me. Now, of course, not everyone is going to have that same opinion. You know, some people are quite happy to stock up on their quests and they really don't mind. However, for me, I just find it's a bit less stress to have those quests done. So I will be aiming to get all my friendship quests done before the next DLC, just because mentally I find it a bit easier. But as I said, that is entirely optional, and if you are a newer player, it's going to be a lot of work to get through everything. So if you are new, don't feel the pressure to get all the friendship quests done. Take your time. Really do take your time. Don't feel stressed. This is more of a, like, if you're a longer term player and you've got quests you can do in like a few hours, then perhaps consider this. And another thing for those potential completionists or players that have been playing for a while, if you do have the other DLCs like Eternity Isle or Storybook Vale, you could actually go through and see if you have any long-standing tasks that need completing. If there's any tasks to do with harvesting certain ingredients, planting various crops, removing certain obstacles like Splinters of Fate, you could go through and have a look, see what you've got left to do, and wrap up those long-term goals on those other DLCs. As I said before, this is not a mandatory thing. There's nothing that specifies this is exactly what you have to do. You know, please do whatever you want, whatever is best for you. But if you're looking for something to grind out beforehand and you are a little bit of a completionist, focusing on these tasks might be handy, because then at least when the DLC comes, you're not going to be stressing over the fact that you need to go visit Eternity Isle, you need to go visit Storybook Vale, because all those areas are complete and you have done the work already. Now, my next recommendation would be to actually stock up on your fruit and veg. Specifically apples, I would recommend, just because of the fact that we know, or at least it seems like the horses seem to like fruits, they seem to like veggie dishes. That is what we're seeing currently. from the gameplay previews and stuff like that is that the horses seem to eat apples and also some kind of salad dish. So I would recommend stockpiling apples, stockpiling some veg, stockpiling them fruits. I don't know exactly what their favorite kind of foods are going to be. We just simply don't have a clue. However, we know that the horses seem receptive to these fruits, to these salads. So make sure you have plenty of fruit and veg stocked up in your valley, in your game, in your storage, so that if you want to grind out and level up those horses as quick as possible, you have the resources available to do it. Now, we know that we need to level up the horses in order to gain certain abilities. So therefore, if you want to unlock those abilities faster, if you want to gain access to the rest of the storyline in Storybook Vale, you are going to have to level those horses up. So perhaps being prepared for petting, grooming, feeding would be a good idea. On the same vein as stocking up in terms of fruit and veg, I would also stockpile certain basic essential items. Things like sugarcane, things like wheat, perhaps go through to Remy's and buy some milk, cheese, and eggs and stuff like that. Whatever you need for basic cooking essentials. We know with some of the previous DLC recipes that we got that some of them do actually require base game ingredients. Usually, as I said, the basics, things like milk, things like wheat, things like sugar, things like lettuce or onion. You know, basic ingredients like that tend to be quite common in these DLC recipes. So I would recommend stockpiling on those basic essentials. Just make sure you've got the bare minimum. Again, if you're trying to stockpile money, if you then have to spend all that money you gain from pumpkin harvesting to buy resources, you're going to need more money. So having all this stuff prepped in advance makes things a lot easier. So I do recommend doing that as well. And my last tip, again, not mandatory, but I would recommend if you are planning to bring the villagers such as Cruella, think about Snow White to your base game valley, make sure you have space for them to decorate and place their houses. Now, I do think for most people, perhaps you might just place them in Wishblossom Ranch to begin with. It's probably what will make sense in terms of doing their quests and friendship rewards and the overall storyline. However, if you are someone who likes to bring characters back to the base valley, perhaps that's your main hub, I would recommend clearing aside some space. We don't know how big their houses are actually going to be. We don't know which characters we will be able to move to the base valley. Hopefully all of them, but we do know certain characters get locked into set locations like Jafar and Maleficent. But you could set aside little areas so that you can create new builds for these new characters if you so wanted to. Again, not really mandatory. I know for myself, I will probably keep the villagers in Wishblossom Ranch for a while. But if you are someone who likes to pull DLC villagers to the base game, that is something that you could prepare. Another tip I would recommend if you do have Eternity Isle, so this is only if you have the Rift in Time expansion. If you don't have the Rift in Time expansion, this isn't going to be very helpful. However, if you have the Rift in Time expansion, I would recommend crafting a few ancient vacuums, cookers, and things like that. Again, it's going to be helpful in terms of getting those resources. You can have cookers making certain dishes. You could have vacuums to help clear up the resources in a biome. I would say you're going to want, as a minimum, 3, because you're going to want 1 for Pixie Acres, 1 for the Gulch, and 1 for the ranch. However, you could make more than that so that you could place some in different areas of those biomes if there's different subsections. But I'd say as a minimum, get at least 3 of the vacuums. It can be so helpful to have those. And as a side note with that, if you are making the vacuums and plan to make use of them, you better make sure you stock up on mist so that you can actually use those devices. There's no point crafting a bunch of ancient vacuums if you have no mist to run them. So I do recommend going around, gaining some mist, stockpiling mist, so that you are caught up in that regard. So I would recommend that, but that only applies, as I said, if you have the Rift in Time expansion. If you don't have access to those cookers, that's nothing you need to stress about. Well, that completes my tips and recommendations on how you can prep for the Wish Blossom Ranch DLC. If you have any other tips or recommendations, make sure to leave them in the comments below so that we can
I'm
share with
here.
the
Hold your
community.
applause.
But I hope you find this helpful if you are someone who does like to prep and be prepared for DLCs when they drop. Hopefully it gives you some helpful tips on things you can do. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe for more Disney Dreamlight Valley content, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye, guys! A huge shout out to our Super Top members, Spread Lake and Caroline Rose. Thank you so much for the additional support on my channel. It does mean so much to me. So thank you very much.